The metallic scent of blood clung to the cold air, mingling with the acrid stench of burning cities. Earth had fallen. What remained of its defiance was now either dead, enslaved, or awaiting judgment in the bowels of the Galactic Empire's warships. Illyria Voss sat chained within the dim cargo hold of one such vessel, her wrists bound in energy restraints that hummed softly against her skin. The room was packed with other captives, scientists, soldiers, leaders, each stripped of their authority and forced into silence. But she was different. The others whispered, their voices brittle with terror. Some prayed forgotten gods. Others wept into their hands. She listened to them, but she did not join them. Fear was a parasite, feeding on those who let it in, and she refused to be its host. Instead, she sat still, her back straight, her eyes steady, and she waited. A sharp hiss split the air as the heavy door slid open. The guards entered in disciplined formation, their exoskeletal armor gleaming under the sickly yellow light. Their leader, a towering figure with obsidian-black skin and luminous violet eyes, scanned the prisoners before settling his gaze on her. "You, on your feet." Illyria rose without hesitation. Chains rattled, but her posture remained unbroken. The guard tilted his head, expecting a reaction. Fear, confusion, pleading, but she gave him none. He gestured, and two soldiers seized her arms, dragging her forward. They did not shove her, did not strike her, as they had done to others. Something about her stillness unsettled them. The murmurs behind her ceased, as if the prisoners sensed that something unusual was happening. The Empire was accustomed to screams. Silence unnerved them. The halls of the warship were a labyrinth of metal and light, each corridor sterile and humming with artificial life. The scent of ozone clung to every surface. As they led her deeper into the ship, Illyria studied her surroundings, not as a prisoner cataloging her suffering, but as a soldier memorizing a battlefield. Every door, every junction, every patrol route. She marked them all. They arrived at a chamber unlike the others. It was vast, lined with high, arched walls pulsing with faint blue veins of energy. At its center stood a figure draped in imperial robes, the silver embroidery catching the dim light. His elongated face bore the sharp, angular features of the Empire's ruling caste. Inquisitor Kraven. The guards shoved her to her knees before him. She remained upright, unyielding. Kraven regarded her with interest, his long fingers clasped behind his back. "Captain Illyria Voss," he said, his voice like oil sliding over steel. "Earth's resistance fought well, but you lost." She met his gaze, her expression impassive. Wars are not won in a single battle. His lips curled into something resembling amusement. He stepped closer, his presence heavy with an authority that had broken countless souls before her. "You have been brought before me because you are an anomaly." Illyria said nothing. He continued, pacing around her. "Humans, as a species, are predictable. They resist, they scream, they plead, and when they realize the futility of it all, they break, some sooner than others. Yet you," he stopped behind her, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you do not fear me." The chamber held its breath. The guard shifted uneasily. Illyria tilted her head slightly. "Should I?" Kraven exhaled through his nose, an approximation of a laugh. "You misunderstand. Fear is not a weakness. It is a law of nature. It governs the survival of lesser beings. Without it, you should not exist." Illyria looked at him then, truly looked at him, and in that moment she saw something rare, a flicker of uncertainty. The Galactic Empire ruled through fear. It was a foundation upon which their dominion rested, and here she was, a prisoner in their grasp, unafraid. She was not simply resisting him. She was denying the very thing that gave him power. His fingers twitched at his side, the only betrayal of his thoughts. "Perhaps," he murmured, "we have not yet tested the limits of your humanity." The guards flanked her again, their grips tightening, but Illyria did not struggle. She did not need to. They could shackle her, beat her, tear her apart, but they could not control what was already beyond their reach. As they dragged her from the chamber, Kraven remained still, watching. The calculated precision of his movements had faltered, if only slightly. He had faced defiant prisoners before, rebels who spat at his feet and swore vengeance before their inevitable collapse. But this woman, This woman did not break. She did not even bend, and that terrified him. Kravin stood in the observation chamber, his hands folded behind his back, watching the woman through the reinforced glass. The cell she occupied was stark, smooth, seamless walls devoid of comfort, a single strip of pale light overhead. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, back straight, unshaken. She had not spoken since their last encounter, nor had she pleaded, demanded, or even acknowledged the fear she should have felt. That should have been impossible. Kravin had seen what happened to those who found themselves in the grasp of the Empire. The vast machinery of subjugation was perfect in its precision, its psychological methods refined over centuries, designed to break even the strongest. Fear was not merely a tool. It was a foundation upon which the Empire stood. Yet here she was, unaffected. A flick of his fingers sent a silent command through the control panel. The chamber dimmed, and the walls trembled as the room's temperature plummeted. He observed her reaction closely. The chill should have been unbearable, designed to draw shivers, tighten muscles, weaken resolve. Her breath should have quickened, shoulders should have tensed. But she did not move. Kravin leaned forward slightly. A flicker of something, annoyance, fascination, tightened in his chest. He gestured again. The temperature reversed in an instant, waves of heat rolling into the chamber, thick and suffocating. Sweat beaded along his own brow as the air in the observation room grew heavy. Still she sat. Kravin exhaled slowly. Behind him, a voice rasped, "This is unnatural." The speaker was one of his subordinates, a lesser interrogator who had come to witness the anomaly firsthand. Kravin did not turn to acknowledge him. His gaze remained fixed on the woman. "No," he murmured. "This is discipline." The Empire had underestimated humanity. Their species had been labeled weak, fragile things, creatures bound to the limits of their biology, their emotional instability, making them easy to manipulate. But this one, she had learned to control herself in ways even Kravin found difficult to comprehend. He tapped the control panel once more. The chamber shifted again, this time filling with an inaudible hum, a carefully engineered frequency, subtle but insidious. It gnawed at the mind, eroding focus, planting whispers of doubt in even the most hardened warriors. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she closed her eyes. A reaction. Finally, Kravin pressed a command again, amplifying the effect. The hum deepened, vibrating through the very walls, designed to unhinge, to disorient, to weaken the will. Then she did something unexpected. She exhaled, long and slow, as if drawing the sound into herself. And when she opened her eyes, she looked directly at him. Through the glass, past the barriers between them, she held his gaze. And she smiled. Kravin stiffened. His subordinate inhaled sharply. No prisoner had ever done this. No prisoner had ever looked upon their tormentor and dared to mock him. He deactivated the sequence with a sharp motion. The hum died, and silence settled between them once more. But the weight of her gaze remained. Kravin turned sharply and strode from the room, his movements crisp, controlled. The guards scrambled to follow, their unease palpable in the sterile corridors of the ship. He did not stop until he reached the inner chambers of the Imperial Citadel, where the air itself seemed to hum with the presence of something greater. He fell to one knee before the towering figure seated upon the elevated throne. The Emperor did not move, his dark, featureless eyes reflecting nothing. He had long transcended the need for expression, his voice little more than a whisper of energy vibrating through the chamber. "You have concerns." It was not a question. Kravin bowed his head lower. "She does not fear us." The silence that followed was absolute. Then a shift, imperceptible, but there. The Empire did not tolerate unpredictability. If fear no longer held humanity in check, then control itself was at risk. The Emperor spoke again, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "Bring her to me." Kravin rose, his pulse steady despite the weight of command. He had suspected this would happen. It was no longer a matter of interrogation. It was a matter of preservation. He turned and left without another word, his mind already constructing the next steps. When he returned to the chamber, the woman had not moved. But as the guards unshackled her and led her forward, he noticed something else: the way they hesitated, the way they refused to meet her eyes. The fear was no longer hers to bear. It had shifted, infected them, and for the first time in his long service to the Empire, Craven felt something close to doubt. The throne room was unlike anything Alara had seen before. It was vast, impossibly so, its dimensions defying any sense of scale. The walls pulsed with a slow, rhythmic energy, as if the structure itself was alive. At its center, elevated on a dais that stretched toward the unseen ceiling, sat the Emperor of the Galactic Empire. He did not look like a man. He did not even look like a being. His form was cloaked in a shifting darkness, his body more suggestion than a physical presence. The only thing visible with any clarity were his eyes, 2 points of blacker-than-black voids that seemed to swallow the very air around them. Alara stood before him, unshackled, unbowed. The silence stretched. The Emperor did not speak, and neither did she. Around the edges of the chamber, high-ranking officials and elite guards stood motionless, their armor gleaming in the dim glow of the chamber's light. Their expressions were unreadable, but their tension was evident. Finally, the Emperor moved, not with the deliberate, calculated motion of a being of flesh and bone, but with the weight of something that existed beyond time. When he spoke, his voice did not emerge from his mouth. It resonated through the chamber, vibrating in the very core of her skull. "You are an aberration." Alara did not flinch. "So I've been told." A ripple passed through the chamber, an unspoken reaction from the assembled officials. No one addressed the Emperor so casually, but he did not strike her down. He only regarded her in that silent, consuming way. "The Empire has endured for millennia," he continued. "It has conquered worlds beyond counting, reduced civilizations to dust. It has done so because all things fear oblivion." He leaned forward slightly, the darkness around him shifting. "And yet you do not." Alara met his gaze, feeling the sheer weight of it pressing against her mind. She could sense him probing, searching for some hidden weakness, some buried terror, but he would find none. "I am not fearless," she said, her voice steady. "I simply refuse to let fear rule me." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled, not a breath, but a shift in the very air of the chamber, like a star collapsing inward. "Curious," he murmured. "You believe yourself to be beyond fear, and yet your defiance is not an absence of it. It is a choice." Alara said nothing. There was nothing to say. He studied her for a moment longer before straightening. "Fear is the foundation of control," he said, addressing not only her, but the entire room. "It binds the weak, it directs the strong. Without it there is only chaos." His gaze darkened. "And chaos is death." A murmur passed through the officials. They had heard these words before, spoken as doctrine, as truth, but this time they carried a different weight. The Emperor regarded Alara once more. "Your defiance is a contagion." Alara held his gaze. "Then perhaps your empire is sick." The room tensed. Craven, standing at the edge of the dais, inhaled sharply, his fingers twitching. No one spoke to the Emperor this way, and yet still he did not strike her down. Instead, he said, "We shall see." With a gesture, he signaled to the guards. Alara was taken by the arm, though not roughly. She was led from the throne room, her fate undecided. But as she walked, she felt it, the shifting weight in the air, the uncertain glances, the whispers in languages she did not understand. The Empire had built itself upon the certainty of fear, and now, for the first time, uncertainty had entered its halls. And uncertainty was the beginning of change. The doors of the Imperial Citadel parted with a slow, mechanical groan, and Alara stepped forward under the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. The vast city stretched before her, a labyrinth of towering spires and shimmering bridges, suspended over endless depths. The sky was a deep, unnatural shade, swirling with the energy of the Empire's dominion. She was free, or at least, that was what they wanted her to believe. The guards who escorted her did not wear their usual rigid expressions of disdain. They looked at her with something else, something almost like wariness. They had expected her to break, to crumble under the weight of the Emperor's gaze. Instead, She had walked away unchanged, and that terrified them more than any rebellion ever had. She moved through the streets, feeling the pulse of the city around her. The towering screens that loomed above every district still broadcast images of the Empire's might. Warships gliding across the void, soldiers marching in perfect unison, entire worlds kneeling in submission. But something had shifted. People were staring at her. Not just humans, other species, other conquered races. They recognized her from the footage, from the whispers that had begun spreading like wildfire. The woman who did not fear the Empire. The woman who had stood before the Emperor himself and had not broken. She did not speak to them, but she did not have to. The act of her presence was enough. She passed through markets where merchants glanced at her, their hands pausing over their wares. She walked by patrols who did not stop her, their grips tightening on their weapons as if unsure of what to do. The Empire had allowed her to leave as a demonstration of its control. Yet in doing so, it had revealed a weakness it had never intended to show. She was a crack in the foundation, and cracks spread. Somewhere deep within the city, a distant explosion rumbled. The Empire's news feeds would call it a minor disturbance, a malfunction, an isolated act of defiance. But Alara knew better. The first stone had been cast. By the time she reached the outer districts, the whispers had turned into something more tangible. Small groups lingered in alleyways, speaking in hushed tones. Some of them looked at her with open curiosity, others with something closer to reverence. She did not stop. Not yet. The Empire would not act immediately. It could not afford to. To strike her down now, so publicly, would only prove what it feared most, that it was not as invincible as it claimed to be. Instead, it would watch. It would wait. It would try to understand what had gone wrong. But it was already too late, because fear had changed hands. By the time night fell over the capital, the city was no longer the same. The banners of the Empire still hung from every building. The soldiers still patrolled in perfect formation. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The people walked differently. They spoke differently. They looked at the Empire not with a dull, resigned acceptance of the conquered, but with something else, something dangerous. Alara stood at the edge of a towering platform, staring down at the endless expanse of the city below. Lights flickered in the distance, a tapestry of stars against the artificial night. She could feel it, the tension in the air, the unspoken understanding that something had begun. She was not a leader. She was not a hero, but she had done something greater than any battle could have achieved. She had shown them that the Empire could be defied, and now it was only a matter of time before the rest of the galaxy followed.